Good morning, you big medical nerds. I'm Kat, and this is Unremarkable Findings. On today's episode of Unremarkable Findings, we're going to talk about Lucy Letby. And if you haven't heard about Lucy Letby, then let me just tell you a little bit about her. So, Lucy is a former British neonatal nurse who was arrested in 2020 on suspicion of some unusual deaths and collapses at the Countess of Chester Hospital. So, this all happened between June of 2015 and June of 2016. Lucy is suspected of killing 7 neonates and attempting to kill 6 or 7 more, depending on what you read. There's some conflicting accounts. Okay, so who is Lucy? Lucy was born as the only child of John and Susan Letby on January 4th, 1919, in Hereford, UK. She attended the St. James Church of England primary school in her youth and then studied child nursing at the University of Chester. She had clinicals at Liverpool Women's Hospital and also at the Countess of Chester. Lucy graduated in September of 2012 with a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing. If asked about who Lucy was, her friends described her as shy and maybe a little bit awkward, but was like generally sociable. That's a hard word to say. Sociable. She would go out to bars and nightclubs with her friends and hospital staff, and she was generally seen by like former friends as quote unquote Miss Perfect. One of her former friends stated she was literally the last person anybody would suspect as a killer. That was a direct quote out of the Summer Times article from this friend. So she did start working at the Countess of Chester in 2012. Shortly after that, there was a staff profile done on Lucy that stated that she had cared for a wide range of children based on whatever like level of support that they needed. So there was like various level of support. That was done in March of 2013. In March of 2014, she completed a neonatal specialization course. And then in early 2015, she was qualified by the Liverpool Women's Hospital after undertaking further training to work with infants in the ICU. There were some issues, kind of like right off the bat, of Lucy starting to work as a nurse. In 2013, according to the Telegraph newspaper, Letby gave 10 times the appropriate amount of morphine to an infant, but they kind of chalked this up as a supposed error. And the mistake, quote unquote mistake, was caught quickly, and there was no harm that came to that child. So, baby's fine, but that was weird. After that, she was placed on suspension and then received extra training. This came directly from the Thirlwall Inquiry, that issue from July of 2013. In April of 2016, they noticed that she administered some antibiotics that were not prescribed to the child at all. But when asked about it, it was just a minor error. So that was pretty weird also. So those were just kind of like one-offs that they just noticed right around that time. During all of this, there were just some rumors that kind of like built up. There were rumors by doctors and other staff members that were just kind of like, someone's killing babies, and we think it's Lucy. Okay, so people started to notice, around June of 2015. That's when the things really started showing up that like something is wrong. Dr. Stephen Breary, I believe is how you say his name, which was one of the attending pediatricians and was like a head consultant on this neonatal unit, noticed that some things were looking not so great for these children. There were 4 collapses in total that he had noticed. 3 of them died. So he thought, I need to open this case up. I need to look at these and see like what is happening. So he did this, started consulting with some other people, but really up to this point, there was no solid proof that anything was going on. Okay. No solid proof. We're in June of 2015 at this point. In June of the next year, Letby had traveled with her friends on a week-long vacation to Ibiza. And there was nothing that really happened while she was gone. And they thought that was pretty weird. A whole week that Lucy isn't here. And then she comes back. And within 72 hours of her being back at the hospital, 2 babies died. Both babies were shown to have air in their stomach, supposedly from the NG tube that was placed and made it difficult to breathe. That's when things started to be really noticed by hospital and executive staff. This was the first time that the executives have met up and started thinking maybe we should call the police. In total, around this time, by the end of June 2016, there were 17 infant deaths or collapses that have happened in regard to Letby being on shift. So they went back and they looked at all the time sheets and everything, trying to figure out like who was responsible, who could potentially be responsible for this. And they saw that Lucy Letby was on shift for every single one of these collapses and deaths. So between June of 2016 and May of 2017, when they publicly announced that police was involved, there was some back and forth with Lucy Letby. She had caught wind of some of this finger pointing that was going on, and she actually launched a complaint, an official grievance with the hospital about how basically bullying and that people were accusing her of certain things, and it was just kind of some back and forth, but I'm not really going to dive super deep into that part. I just want to talk about the investigation. So in May of 2017, it was publicly announced to the media that the police was involved and they were going to investigate. And that investigation was called Operation Hummingbird. It was supposedly going to last however long it needed to last, and it lasted for a year. So enter Dr. Dewey Evans. Dr. Dewey Evans read about this investigation and decided that he was going to offer his assistance. He is a retired pediatrician, so he sees that he's the most qualified to do this. So he offered his assistance. During this, he was instructed that he needed to review 61 cases of sudden collapse or death. Review these clinical records, get back to us. During this time, he produced multiple reports for the Cheshire Police, and his conclusions were peer-reviewed by a consultant, Sandy Bowen. So he was not just doing this on his own. He produced those records, and then Sandy Bowen looked over them. And the police ultimately narrowed his cases from 61 to 22, and that's what formed the basis of charges on Lucy for her trial. That was in May of 2017. July 3rd, Lucy is initially arrested on the suspicion of 8 counts of murder and 6 counts of attempted murder. So that's when she was initially arrested, July 3rd. Then she was bailed on July 6th. She was rearrested in June of 2019, bailed out again, and then arrested for the third and final time, November of 2020. There are several articles in Wikipedia pages and things like that on what was going on in between those times. But to narrow it down, this was mostly due to evidence gathering. So they would gather some evidence, arrest her, ask her some questions. They'd have to release her on bail. It was kind of this back and forth thing with them. And the Netflix documentary about Lucy is very good if you guys want to go watch that. Okay, the trial. Let's get into it a little bit, shall we? October 10th, 2022 is when Lucy's trial started. Prosecution had an opening remark that was 90 pages long. They mentioned physical trauma. removal of breathing tubes, overfeedings, how she changed these methods so that it wasn't coming up as suspicious. They brought up how when she was asked about these babies in interviews, she would remember them, but not all of them. They would go on within this trial to present several different variations of evidence. There would be expert witnesses and different clinicians and some parents. They would show cited texts from certain colleagues where, like, she would text her colleagues showing inappropriate interest in these clinical cases and these children that have died or collapsed in her care. Letby was even found to be searching for the families of these children on Facebook, like on certain anniversaries or special dates or anything like that, which, as a clinical person working in EMS and nursing, don't look up your patients. Don't look up your patients' families. That's weird. Just let them grieve and don't dig into their personal life. Why would you do that? Anyways, prosecution showed that 7 children had died or had complications with evidence of air embolisms found in their body. Which you could say, well, Kat, it could have been an error. Yeah, very well could have been. However, that shouldn't really be possible because of buretrals. And if you don't know what buretrals are very specific, calibrated, like little cylinders that are used for exact, precise delivery of meds and infusions for children. They're like 100 to 150 mLs, and they have a float valve at the top of them before it goes to the patient to prevent any air from entering that child accidentally. They're usually 60 drop sets for anybody. If you go and look them up, they're like this really tall. They look like, the beakers, like the big, tall, skinny beakers that you used in chemistry class? That's what they kind of look like. So this should not have accidentally happened. Okay. So that's one of the things that the prosecution brought up. Another thing that they alleged was that there were 2 infants that were injected with insulin that were not diabetics. They should not have had insulin at that time. And they cited this as cited the blood tests that identified that these children had insulin in their bodies when they should not have. This was brought up by Dewey Evans, that pediatrician that we started talking about earlier. He had described this piece of evidence as key evidence in this situation, although his interpretation has been questioned since. Some people are trying to say that Dewey is a shifty guy. I don't know. What else did the prosecution find, you say? You may be asking. So the PD, when they started doing the original investigation and looking through some stuff, they originally found handwritten notes by Lucy that said, quote, that she killed them on purpose and that she was evil and did this to them. They found these handwritten notes. They show them on the documentary. However, she denied it. And she said that this was not an admission of guilt and that she only wrote those things because her primary care provider advised her to do so as a coping mechanism. Okay, I don't know any doctors that would tell you, hey, write down that you killed people. Why would you say that? But I don't know. I'm not a doctor. Okay, so in addition to those handwritten notes, they found medical documents at her house that ranged from nursing handoff reports to medical records just at her house. There were 257 pages found of medical documentation and handoff reports at this lady's house, which she just chalked up to being, I got off shift, I forgot to empty my pockets, I forgot to take it out. That's totally valid, guys. It happens. Like, we all go to work, shove things in our pockets. That's why scrubs have pockets, right? That's why BDUs have pockets. But just get rid of them. Don't take stuff home. Like, at the end of your shift, clean out your pockets and your medical books or whatever you have with you and shred them. Okay, so Lucy described herself as somebody who collected paper, which is weird. And she said she wasn't able to get rid of them because they needed to be shredded. That's what you do with medical confidential documentation. But she didn't have one. That's what she said. And then later, PD comes back and they said, yeah, you do, babe. And they took a picture of it, and there is a shredder in the closet at her house. Yikes. Okay. Anyways, Lucy, babe, you can't say you don't have a shredder, and then it turns out that you have a shredder inside of your house. Either way, I digress. Let's see what the defense has to say about things. Okay, so the defense. This is what they said. I bet you can guess. Lucy, dear sweet Lucy, was a dedicated nurse, but she was working in a system that had failed her. Okay, all right, babe. They tried to say that all of this can be chalked up to short staffing and medical equipment malfunction. One of their defense witnesses was a plumber who came in and testified and said that the unit had recurring issues with plumbing, which then showed that the unit's water supplies was contaminated with Pseudomonas, which could have been a contributor to the elevating mortality rate within that unit. Okay, sure. But then the defense said, we don't have any reason about the air embolism allegations, but they don't have any proof, so not true. Couldn't have been us. They have no proof of this happening. Which is an interesting defense to take. But I know it happens. It happens all the time. And that's just how it was. But Justice Goss ruled that there was a significant body of accepted medical opinion to allow that these allegations be considered by the jury. So they can say, like, there's not enough evidence. But the experts and the judge are saying that there is significant evidence with the medical opinion that he's allowing the allegations to be considered by the jury. So what happened to her? Final verdicts of Lucy Letby were delivered on August 18th, 2023. Lucy was found guilty of 7 counts of murder and 7 counts of attempted murder. 11 of these convictions were reached by a 10-1 majority, while the verdicts concerning 3 other children were unanimous. She was acquitted on 2 accounts of attempted murder, and the jury was unable to reach verdicts on 6 additional attempted murder charges. That left Lucy with multiple counts of murder and attempted murder. Lucy was acquitted on attempted murder on 9 counts total. But whenever they came back and gave her sentencing on August 21st, 2023, she was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order, which is the most severe penalty available under law in UK. She is only the 4th woman in the UK history to receive this sentence. Justice Goss described her actions as cruel, calculated, and cynical campaign of child murder involving the smallest and most vulnerable populations, adding that there was a deep malevolence bordering on sadism. They said that she has no remorse. Letby did not attest the sentence hearing, and therefore she never heard the victim impact statements. I know that some people are looking to change the law of this, but I don't think it has been so far. As of January of 2024, she's being held at HM Prison in Bronzefield. There has been no motive established on why she did this. They don't know. There are some commentators on this trial that are comparing her case to the Beverly Elite case. And I don't know if you know that. That is a former nurse who was convicted of murdering children in 1993 by methods of insulin injection and air embolisms. We will get into that a little further later. But as of right now, I just want to talk about some further, after the trial things. In January of 2024, she sent in an appeal to the Court of Appeals for permission to challenge her convictions, and it was refused. She renewed her application, and then in a 3-day hearing in April of 2024, they refused. A panel of 3 judges, Dame Victoria Sharp, Lord Justice Holroyd, and Mrs. Justice Lambert, refused her permission to appeal. At a hearing on September 25th, 2023, the Crown Prosecution Service confirmed that there would be a retrial on one of the 6 attempted murder charges that they were unable to reach a verdict at. And that retrial started on June 10th of 2024. That retrial lasted less than a month, and on July 2nd, Lucy Letby was found guilty of attempted murder of that additional child. And then on July 5th, she received an additional further whole life order. She has then since has gone to try and appeal these further convictions, but they keep telling her no. And then in January of this year, after reviewing evidence relating to allegations of murder involving 2 other children and attempted murder involving 7 others, the Crown Prosecution Service announced that no further charges will be brought against Lucy. Okay. So, I think this is crazy. I had never heard about this before. If you guys have any concerns or considerations about this case, please let me know. This is awful. Children should not die at the hands of somebody who swore to protect them and take care of them. As a medical provider myself, I cannot imagine ever putting myself in a situation where children would be harmed. Let me know what you think about this. And stay tuned for further episodes of Unremarkable Findings. Because on this part, in this case, these findings were pretty remarkable. I'm Kat Knox, and tune in next week. Thank you so much for being here.